Jonathan was elected to Los Altos City Council in 2020 and served as the city's mayor in 2024. Community involvement has always been an important value of Jonathan. In 2015, he was appointed to the city's Park and Recreation Commission, where he served until his election to the council. Jonathan and his wife, Edith, moved to Los Altos in 2009. Their son, Noah, is a junior at Los Altos High School, and their daughter, Emma, is a freshman at Los Altos High School. A Bay Area native, Jonathan was born and raised in Oakland. He attended college in Southern California and received his law degree from Hastings College of Law in 2001. Jonathan has practiced law for more than 20 years and is now a partner with the law firm Finkelstein and Fuji in San Mateo. Jonathan's practice focuses on real estate law and trust and probate law. Thank you very much for joining us today, Jonathan.
Thank you
I'll
very much
start.
for having me. I appreciate the invitation.
Thank you. I'll start with a few questions here. Um, and Let's see. You've been serving on the council for a little over 4 years now and as mayor for a year. How is being mayor different from being a council member?
Sure. Before I get into it, I just want to let everyone know I'm getting over a cold. If I sound a little stuffy, it's because I am a little stuffy. I have a cough suppressant in my mouth right now, so I apologize for that as well, but better than having me cough through the entire hour. Getting to your question, look, it is a completely different role. As a member of the council, all five of us are advocates and stewards of the city. But when you're selected to be the mayor, you're also a facilitator. It's the mayor's responsibility to make sure that the council is meeting its responsibilities while you're still trying to balance five people's agreements, disagreements, personal priorities, and visions for the city. There's plenty of herding cats that are involved with that, as you can imagine. So as mayor, it was always my in the back of my mind that my goal was to balance what must get accomplished with what we want to get accomplished. And that means you have to manage the calendar and you have to manage everyone's personal resources. There's only a limited amount of time to get things done. There's only a limited amount that staff has the bandwidth to be able to do. But you got five people with grand ideas. So there's a lot of balancing that gets involved with that. You have to identify what are the most important issues to members of the council. And when the council decides that they want to bring something forward, determine when are you going to actually bring that forward for discussion. Sometimes some feathers can get ruffled, but for the most part, I was very lucky because I think we had a very professional council when I was mayor last year. And because I had colleagues who wanted to have a successful year, that made it easier for me to have a successful year. But when you're mayor, you're not just looking at the issues as an advocate and as a steward. You really are trying to think of how to manage everyone's expectations and get to a resolution and to do it efficiently. Time matters. It was really important to me that we start our meetings on time. And I wanted to give everyone an opportunity to say what they wanted to say, but I didn't want to spend time ad nauseum on things where we didn't need to. Sometimes someone was in the minority and they wanted to create a record, they wanted to make a statement. That's important, but then it was time to move on. And I think I was successful in doing that.
Great, thank you. What do you consider to be the major accomplishments during your tenure as mayor?
If I had to point to one major sort of procedural accomplishment as mayor, I'd say it's that we did the things that the council had to do. We did it efficiently and we did it professionally. We passed the budget with a $3 million projected surplus on time after just one study session and one regular meeting. That's because the council really spent the time to understand the issue, to get educated, and we were ready to go. We successfully continued to implement the housing element. That's something that we was incumbent upon us to do, and we did. And we adopted our resolution to move the city from at-large to district elections. And that's not something that I wanted to do. That's something I wish that we had to do, but it was something that it was incumbent upon us to do. Otherwise, there would be consequences. So again, you saw that professionalism. Even though the vast majority of the council, the supermajority of the council, did not want to go to district elections, we knew it was something we had to do. So we went through the process and we got it done. Above and beyond that, we revised and streamlined our permitting process. We moved forward with sustainability initiatives. And I think some of the biggest changes that are going to be visible to the residents of Los Altos is that we have made huge strides when it comes to the future of downtown. We're now looking at putting housing on one, maybe two of the parking plazas downtown. That's something that hopefully is going to get clarified this year. We move forward with the idea of having a park downtown and moving parking underground beneath it. That's something that hopefully we'll get clarity on this year as well. The permanent parklet program has been implemented. I think it's wonderful. Everyone really seems to like it. And we have improvements to downtown lighting and the electrical grid. I mean, those are also major changes downtown that's going to make it a more pleasant place for everyone to be.
Great, thank you. During a community coalition meeting in February of last year, you said the biggest challenges in front of us were improving our public safety infrastructure, improving mobile connectivity to both downtown and throughout the rest of the city, and catching up on deferred maintenance to our streets and other city infrastructure. How well do you think the city met those challenges in 2024?
I think we met two of the three really well. And a lot of this work is kind of beneath the waterline, so people may not see it quite as readily. But we made a lot of strides when it came to mobile connectivity and deferred maintenance. Downtown coverage is already a lot better than it was 1 and 2 years ago. Again, it's not the sort of thing where you have a ribbon cutting, say, hey, here's the new router over there, there's a new tower over there. But those things did happen. There has been an improvement in technology downtown by the telecoms that has allowed for better connectivity. And I think you're seeing that in Lincoln Park as well during the Art in the Park Festival. AT&T has received permits to install their small cell nodes in residential neighborhoods. The Planning Commission last year, they approved an application from AT&T to install a very large tower at the MSC in the middle of the city. I think it's like an 80-foot tower. This is going to be in the form of one of those fake trees. That's going to improve telecommunications in the city. We also passed an ordinance to make it easier for the telecoms to install fiber optic and other in-ground type of connectivity solutions. I know that city staff has been working, I think, with Sonic and some of the other developers to offer some of the options to Los Altos residents that have been available to many of our neighbors. These things are happening, and I think the council really made a lot of positive steps. Staff took a lot of positive steps, and they're not the sort of thing that you go out and release, you have a press release and you do a lot of rah-rahs about, but connectivity really is getting better throughout the city. I promise you, it really, really is. Deferred maintenance, we are catching up. As part of the budget process, we moved from just what we called a CIP, capital improvement process. We've modified that, so it's now capital improvement and major maintenance programs. So instead of CIPs, they're CIMMPs, I guess. And a lot of the deferred maintenance that the city needed to catch up on is being addressed through the programs. So if you go back and take a look at the budget, which I know is not exciting reading for most people, but if you take a look at where the money is being spent in these projects over the next 5 years, you're going to see that a lot of that deferred maintenance is being addressed. So you're going to see better pathways in our parks. You're going to see new playgrounds being installed. It's not just window dressing. We know that there's a problem. Here is our plan to now address the problem and get it done. And we're following through on it.
Great.
Public safety infrastructure. So we actually did have some positive work on that area. There is a CIMMP, or I guess multiple CIMMPs that are designed to address the needs at the firehouses for new roofs, I think some foundational work and some other work. So that major maintenance is already a part of the budget. But we haven't made any strides yet when it comes to a solution for what we're going to do with the police station. The police station that we have right now, it's no secret, is insufficient. We need to make modifications to it. We need to make a choice. Either we're going to renovate what we have right now to make it better, or we're going to have to replace it with a brand new facility. One way or another, this is going to be a very expensive process. Sorry, my dog is announcing himself in the background. That's not distracting anyone. Anyway, so while I had hoped as mayor that I would have been able to lead a discussion about what we want to do about the police station, it just really wasn't in the cards that during the year that I was mayor. And there's a number of reasons for that. Number one, when we got hit with the Shankman letter, a lot of resources and time had to go into that. And once we realized, I think, how big a job it was going to be to discuss going into districts and then going through the process of actually dividing into districts, we really understood that was going to take just an enormous amount of staff time, council time, and that we were going to have to make sacrifices on other things that the council wanted to do. But there were some other issues too that were going on. So as you know, the school districts have been asking for an awful lot of money over the past couple of years. And I don't begrudge them for that. I mean, this is money that was needed. I supported, I think, all the bonds that went out to the public. But because the school districts were asking for so much money, they're sucking a lot of the goodwill. And we didn't want to have to put a bond measure on the ballot that would compete against the schools. I think that would have been detrimental to both the city and the schools. We wanted to work with everyone. We want to make sure that the public kind of has time to digest all the money that it's being asked to give to government. Finally, and as part of the process of moving into districts, the question of whether or not Los Altos should be a charter city has also come up. I know it's something that the council is going to take up at our next council meeting. I imagine that this is going to be an ongoing discussion that will turn into a more detailed process throughout the year. But if the city is going to become a charter city, it opens up new options for funding. And until we know what we're going to do with respect to a charter city, I think it actually is premature to make any kind of a permanent funding plan for the police station, because we don't want to plan on something that we're not going to be able to do. At the same time, we don't want to lock ourselves into some kind of a financial tool that may be inferior to something we could do once we become a charter city.
Thank you. John Lennon wrote, "Life is what happens when you're making other plans." While you were mayor, what unexpected things happened while the city was making other plans? So you already referenced the district election matter, but do you want to elaborate on that or add anything else?
We sort of went in with a bang and we went out with a bang, and going out with the bang is the effects of the Shankman letter. And I don't think anyone had predicted that. We did what we had to do. We did what the law required the city to do. There are some cities that have fought Mr. Shankman and other attorneys who have done what he has done. That was a decision that the city council decided not to take because the track record of cities that fight is not good. So from my perspective, it was, well, we can divide the city into districts and move away from at-large elections, which I really don't want to do. Or we could fight it, pay perhaps millions of dollars in attorney's fees, and then be forced to do the same thing. So should we pay money for the privilege to do it? Or should we just do what the law has compelled us to do? And that's what we did. But many people don't remember, but my mayorship actually came in with another bang. And that was the need for the council to consider a resolution about the Israeli-Palestinian war. You're not seeing so many protests at city councils anymore, but in December of 2023, January of 2024, I mean, there were protests at just about every local city council meeting, school board meeting throughout the Bay Area. I mean, this was happening everywhere. It was Los Altos was not immune to it. It was very difficult coming into my mayorship, knowing that that's the first thing that has to get addressed. I think that it was an important process. I think it was a necessary process. We had, I think, altogether in a couple of meetings, about 150 people, members of the public, come and speak on the issue. That I think demonstrates that there was a need to have a public discussion. And in retrospect, I think that the resolution that was passed was the best resolution that could have been passed. Maybe not, but I do think it was important that we went through that process, and it was disruptive, and it was difficult, and it was a very hard way to start off being a mayor. But it happened. I think that so between that and the Schenkman letter, the third thing that I would point to as really being unexpected was the recent lawsuit that was filed against the city by, I want to say Carla. That's not their acronym anymore, but it's the California Renters something. And it's ongoing litigation, so I'm not going to get into the specifics of it. But it was not something that I was expecting to see. I think that between the housing element that the council put forward and the work that we had done at 330 Distill and other parts of the city, I think it was pretty clear that the city of Los Altos kind of had changed some of its reputation from prior years. So the Carla lawsuit was really kind of unexpected to me.
Thank you. With respect to district elections, how do you think district elections in Los Altos will likely play out going forward, particularly in 2026 and 2028?
So I remain optimistic that we will be able to find a solution that will allow the city to avoid district elections or go back to at-large elections as quickly as possible. I think that at-large elections really are better for the city. District elections are disenfranchising 80% of the population. Instead of voting for one of 5 council members every 2 years, you're going to be voting for one person every 4 years. And that's I think that is a detriment to the citizenry. Nevertheless, we are where we are, and the law is what it is for now. I know that there have been efforts that have been made to try to change the Voting Rights Act with respect to how it affects small cities like Los Altos that don't have the ability to create minority and majority districts. But those options they have not moved forward. So we have to assume that district elections are going to move forward in 2026 and beyond. And there's some good things that are going to come from that. First of that is retail politics is definitely back in play. If you are dealing with a district of 6,000 people in a smaller area as opposed to 30,000 people in a much larger area, it is easier to make voter contact. It is easier to knock on doors. It is easier to locate yourself centrally within a district, so people will be able to find you. And that's a good thing, because if you want to serve the residents of Los Altos, you have to know what the residents of Los Altos think, what they want, what are their fears, what are their hopes. It's also going to reduce the cost of running for office. I mean, it costs a lot more to run for an at-large district than it will for a smaller district. It's just an economy of scale, right? And it has gotten very expensive to run for a seat in Los Altos. There's no question about that. I am nervous that this is going to lead to a lot more fractionalized council. Once you have members who are elected not at large, but who are responsible to their own individual district, I think that you run the risk of council members who are more interested in bringing home the bacon to their district than to the entire city. And I don't want to say that in a way that's disparaging. The whole point of going to districts is to make sure that micro communities are being served. And if you're being elected by a small group in a smaller district, then sure, you do have an obligation to make sure that their interests are represented. But that could make it harder to find compromise. And I think that ultimately the city will suffer when you have 5 council members who are more focused on their own geographic areas than on larger areas. In worst case scenario, you have council members who they're going to insist that the amount of money spent in the city is equal throughout all the districts every single year, which makes sense sort of from a fairness perspective, but there may be greater needs in one part of the city than in another part of the city to spend money? Are you going to get a council member who's going to look at the budget and say, all of these CIMMP programs are being taken care of in this district? How come they're not more in my district? Well, maybe another district just simply has more needs than your particular district at this time. It could put a tremendous strain on staff. Worst case scenario, I think you could have a situation where there's a slush fund for each council member and they get to spend it in their district. So $10,000 per council member, and you can direct staff to spend it fixing that pothole or that street light. And that, you know, it's a way for council members to tell their constituents, hey, look, I'm doing things for our district and this is how I'm doing it, but it's not necessarily the best way to spend money.
What are the best and what are the most challenging aspects of serving as Los Altos' mayor?
Both the best and the most challenging is relationship building. When you're mayor, you get to set the agenda, which means you get to set when the conversations are taking place and what the conversations that take place are going, how they're going to move forward. That means that you have the opportunity to bring people together. Being mayor, it's you're the mouthpiece for the city, and people look at the mayor and say, you're the guy, you're the leader, you're the one who's in a position of control. Now, the reality is when it comes to actual policymaking, the mayor is just 1 out of 5. But there is power in being able to set the agenda, and there is power in being able to get people together, to bring them together, to listen to them. But listening to people is only part of the process. The real challenge is getting people to talk to one another. If you have people who live in a neighborhood that's being impacted by student parking, how do you get the person who's upset that their contractor won't be able to park on the street to understand the difficulties faced by someone who won't get their mail because students are parking in front of the mailbox and the post office won't walk around someone's car? It's difficult, it's challenging, and there's not always a solution. But I think the most important part of being mayor is having that platform where you can say, here are the issues, here's how I see it, here are the people that are involved. Let's talk about it and see if we can come up with some kind of an idea. Let's see if we can find some kind of a way to resolve a problem. Let's see if we can find some way to compromise. Sometimes you can do it, sometimes you can't. But as mayor, you're always the face of the city. You always have that opportunity to come before LACC, any other organization in the city and say, hey, you know, here's what I can do for you. What can you do for me? Let's try to make it all work together so that I'm giving you the services from the city that you want and need.
Thank you. When I complete a job or a project, I make it a practice of always reviewing how things went. And I'm wondering, looking back on your term as mayor, what worked well, what could have worked better, and what lessons did you learn?
Yeah, I think if I could go back and do it again, two things that I would have done differently is one, that the process that we had in our annual military equipment policy for the police. I think we followed sort of the letter of the law, but there were members of the community who didn't feel heard. They felt that they were not heard and were upset by the process. And I think it created some unnecessary tension. So I would have redone that. Another thing that I would do differently is working with the commissions. The city council met with each commission at the beginning of the year, and I think that was useful. I think staff has done a good job in explaining to the commissions what is their role and how they can work within the parameters of the priorities established by the council. But once the commissions sort of went their separate ways, there were a few commissions that I think really experienced some challenges in how they operated and in their workflow. And if the council had been a little more proactive, or if I as mayor had just been a little more proactive and sticking my head in the door, talking to people and keeping a closer eye on that, I think we could have gotten some more useful work out of some of the commissions. So that those are two things that I would have done differently.
Thank you. We're just beginning 2025 with many issues facing the city this coming year. What do you view as the biggest challenges facing Los Altos right now?
Well, the biggest challenge I think is really a high level challenge, and that is what is our vision of the city? Um, there are some people I think who view Los Altos as still this rural farm type community, that's in just sort of a haven from the rest of the world, and that's not who we are. We are a mature suburbanized community. We are a part of a very large region, one of the largest in the United States. And we are going to continue to grow, and we are going to continue to change. One thing that I've said for a very long time is if you do not manage change, change will manage you. Um, we need to come to an understanding as a community that it's our responsibility to manage that change. You look at housing in particular, that's going to have the housing laws are going to have a tremendous impact on the city. You look at what's happening downtown, you look at what's happening on El Camino. More housing is coming, and there's going to be more residents in Los Altos up and down the socioeconomic strata. And I think that's a good thing. There are people who don't want more housing to come to Los Altos. And I don't believe that the people who want to slow down the housing changes are bad people. I don't think that it's racist. I don't think any of that. I think that there are people who just really like their community. They like Los Altos. They lived here for a long time. They raised their family here. Why does anything have to change? San Jose is a big city. It can handle more people. Let's just build more housing there. But the reality is that housing is a regional challenge, and regional challenges need regional solutions. I think everybody on the Zoom call understands why the argument of, well, we'll just build new housing somewhere else doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't lead to a healthy community. But the way that we are going to look at housing, the way that we are going to look at traffic, the way that we are going to look at climate change as a community is going to affect the character and the type of city that Los Altos will be. The character of the city is not defined by the buildings that are within it. The character of a city is defined by the people who live in it. And I think we're going to see that tussle, the difficult conversations. They've kind of gone on a hiatus for a little bit since we adopted the new housing element. But now that we have major changes coming to downtown, I think you're going to see them resurface. And I think those are important conversations to have. Something that really nobody is talking about yet because they don't want to is when we have our mid-cycle review, there's no question that Los Altos is not going to be where we want it to be. We're not going to have built as much housing as we want to have built, though I still think that we're pretty good at what we're doing. But the reality is that the economy has not been favorable to building additional housing. I think that that's going to start changing. I'm looking forward to that. I think that this is a challenge that Los Altos is not going to be alone in facing. This is something up and down the state that jurisdictions are going to have to deal with. They've not built as much housing as their housing elements have been designed to promote. Beyond that, though, we're only, I don't know, what is it, next 3 years maybe from starting the discussion about the next housing element update. And that one could be brutal. The last one was not easy, but once we made the decision that we were not going to upzone the R1 neighborhoods, the math kind of worked itself out. That may not be an opportunity for the city when it comes to the next housing element update. And that's going to force us again to decide who do we want to be as a city? What do we see as the future of the city? Who are we as a people? And are we going to be welcoming? Are we going to be obstinate? How are we going to balance our desire to continue living in such a wonderful community with the changes that are happening so rapidly around us and within us.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any closing thoughts or remarks before we open it up?
Well, I do want to say thank you once again very much for giving me the opportunity to be here today. It was a lot of fun being mayor. Yes, it was challenging. It was difficult at times. It's an awful lot of time. It's a huge time commitment, but I really did enjoy it. There were a lot of fun parts of being mayor. There's the ceremonial aspect, getting to ride in the convertible during the Festival of Lights parade. It is an absolute blast. Um, but in inviting me to come here and join you today, you gave me the opportunity to sort of pause and think for an hour or two about what it was like being mayor. And that so something I don't always do very well is sort of sit down and give an introspective go down memory lane in an introspective way and think about what it was that was accomplished, what it was that was left on the table, and sort of where we are. And I really appreciate you giving me that process. I would be absolutely remiss to say that the success of my mayorship, and I do believe that I was a successful mayor, but the success of my mayorship was absolutely dependent upon three things. It was dependent upon a community that supported me. It was dependent upon a staff that worked very hard and was very constructive. And finally, and most importantly, I had four colleagues who wanted to work professionally, who wanted to get the job done. It was not about, this is the Jonathan Weinberg show. It was about, let's get the work done for Los Altos that we need to do and keep pushing us in a direction that we need to be. Without a group of colleagues that were willing to work with one another, to hear one another, to prepare, to contribute, to listen, to compromise, it doesn't happen without all of that. So again, I want to thank my four colleagues that were with me on the council while I was mayor.
Jonathan, thank you very much for a great conversation. I'd like to now open it up to the attendees for questions. Please raise your virtual hand and I'll call on you. And remember, please, one question per person and no speeches, please. Anybody have any questions there? Please raise your virtual hands. And Gary's trying to find his virtual hand button in the new Zoom control.
I am trying to.
Well, I'll call on you
There we
right away
go.
since I know but you found it there. Gary.
Oh, Jonathan, thank you so much for the wrap up there. Not that you're off the council, but it was really good to hear a lot of stuff that has happened in the past year. I guess my question then is the climate action and adaptation plan. We evaluate that every 2 years. And at the commission meeting last Wednesday, 2 days ago, they talked about that. And it wasn't clear to me that we're making the progress we need to make. And some of the metrics were a little hard to understand or see if they were actually still allowing us to make the right comparisons. But vehicle miles travel is up, and I think the electricity use is up. We're building more housing. A lot of it's bigger housing, and it takes more electricity, even though they're more efficient. So I'm worried that we're not making the progress we need to make. Your thoughts?
I think you're right. And when the climate action adaptation plan was put together, a lot of the heavy hitting for the goals that Los Altos wanted to hit were included in the idea that we're going to keep moving forward on reach codes. And I think everybody here understands why we're not moving forward with reach codes anymore. I'm disappointed by that, but again, it is what it is. The law is what the courts have said that it is. So now I think it's really incumbent upon the city to go back, take a hard look at the climate action adaptation plan, evaluate our goals. And I think that our goals are good, but it never hurts to say, hey, are these the goals that we should be shooting for? And once we've decided that these are the goals that we want to continue to shoot for or Here's how we want to modify them. Then we've got to do the hard work of figuring out how we're actually going to do that. I do believe that I was as you know, I was the liaison to the Environmental Commission for the past year.
Yep.
I heard the debates. I heard the concerns. I think that they are well taken. I don't think that there's alarmism at all. I think that we are not going to meet the goals that we have set for ourselves in that plan. So what I want the council to do is to treat the climate action adaptation plan the same way that we treated the housing element. So at the back of every one of council's packets, there's sort of a map that shows us in color how we're doing when it comes to the housing element. I think the time has come for us to start doing that with the climate action adaptation plan. I'm not the mayor anymore, so it's harder to sort of try to make this happen. But Nick Zorns actually did spend a lot of time starting that process, and Nick, thank you very much for getting that started. So there is a document out there, and I believe it's already been shared with the Environmental Commission as well. So it's in the public realm. That's similar to how we're tracking the housing element update. I keep calling it the update. As we're tracking our progress on the housing element, we need to do that for the climate action adaptation plan. I think having that visual in front of us every other week or so with the council packet will make sure that the climate action adaptation plan remains at the forefront of everyone's mind. And that's the tool I think that we need to really get us to get back on track when it comes to what Los Altos is doing to fight climate change. I think we have, I don't want to say fallen off the wagon, because some good work has been done in the Environmental Commission, but we're not on track to meet our goals anymore. And we've got to address that. And if we are serious about doing our part to fight climate change, we need to do that earlier rather than later. The longer we wait, the easier it's going to be to say, well, we've got to move our target back from 2035 to 2040. I don't want to do that. I want to look at it now, and I want to say, here's what we want to do. Here's how we're going to go ahead and do it. That discussion has to happen sooner rather than later.
Well, they are going to meet with the council in February and come up with 3 or 4 things that they can work on, because there's so much stuff they could work on. They've got a laundry list that's a mile long, and they just have to focus.
Yeah, I agree. And frankly, I think the council needs to do a better job of communicating what it wants from the Environmental Commission, and determining how it can support the Environmental Commission. Staff is doing a very good job working with them, but there were some disconnects toward the end of the year last year with respect to what council was expecting from the EC and what the EC delivered. And I know I'm not blaming anyone other than me, I guess, as mayor. I'm the one who's sure that didn't happen.
Okay.
But look, the Environmental Commission, I mean, this is a very smart group of people that's ready to go. And they've got a lot of good ideas, not all of which are, some are more practical than others. But they're the council's first tool in first sounding the alarm, which they've done, and then in helping guide us to get us back on track.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Jenny, I see your hand up. Please unmute and ask your question.
Jonathan, where does the library patio and that whole topic stand now?
So that's moving forward through the process, and I don't know exactly where it is, but at some point it's going to go through the commissions, and I don't know which commissions it's necessarily going to go through. My expectation is that plans are going to go to the Planning Commission, and then the Planning Commission will vote whether or not to approve it. It may also have to go through Parks and Rec. It may also have to go through Historical. I don't know that determination has been made yet. And I think that determination largely depends upon the final architectural plans that are submitted. So is it going to encroach on the orchard? And if it does, do we have to bring it to the historical commission? Does it fall within the purview of park? And if so, then it's going to have to go to park. Ultimately, I can't imagine it's not going to go to the planning commission at some point, but I don't know sort of where it is in the entire process.
Thank you. Any other questions out there? Raise your virtual or real hand if you can't find the virtual button. Gary again.
Yeah, I waited for everybody else to have a chance, but did you notice in the town crier this week, they're calling out for a virtual poll, and the topics are sewers, police station, Hillview Dog Park, Orchard districts elections, and the Grant Park Senior Center. Oh, I know. Less attention to downtown and more elsewhere. So nothing about the downtown things that we often talk about: housing, the park downtown, and the theater. Oh, so what's going on here with the town crier?
You have to talk to Bruce about that. I mean, look, there's no doubt that a lot of attention has been paid over the past 2 years to downtown. The biggest projects in the city are about to take place downtown, but it's not because of a lack of interest in other parts of the city. I mean, the reality is that our most important in terms of revenue, our largest business district, and therefore the most important district, is downtown. And that is the major community gathering spot within the city. I don't think that Rancho gets ignored, but Rancho is a private, it's a private development. It's a private shopping center. So it's the same with Woodland, Foothill Crossing, Village Court. I mean, these are private shopping centers that are, for the most part, they're doing well. They're serving their communities. A lot of the communities in Los Altos don't want the same attention that we're giving to downtown. Loyola Corners prides itself on not being downtown. They're quieter, they're smaller, it's a little bit more casual. They don't want the same vibrancy that many of the restaurants and shop owners downtown rely upon. It's just different. Downtown, I think it is a part of the community that has been neglected over the past several decades. So whereas you're seeing deferred maintenance in a lot of our parks, you saw a lot of deferred attention to downtown. Look, let's face it, there's not a lot of major things that have changed in Los Altos over the past 20, 30 years. And the council has really changed that. It's been pedal to the metal. We're moving as fast as can be to try to catch up with some things that have to be done to meet some of our obligations to the state, and to move forward with amenities that we know that people really do want. And the reality is that downtown and the Civic Center is where those changes are taking place. You run the risk when we move to district elections, you run the risk of a more fractionalized council. Fractionalized councils tend to lead to fewer major projects like that. That's why you're seeing them happen right now. But even though I do hear people say, I don't think it's fair that we're spending so many resources in one part of the city as opposed to the other, I really haven't heard people say you're neglecting another part of the city. There are some exceptions to that. I think that electrifying Grant Park, getting hot water in there and heat, I mean, it is, if the city has one big disgrace, that's it. I used to say it was Halsey House. We haven't done anything with that. And I still believe that Halsey House is a disgrace to the city. But I mean, the Grant Park Community Center, it's used. There's a senior center that's run out of there. For the city not to have provided hot water and electricity at that community center for years is absolutely disgraceful. Good news is that we are fixing it. We are spending time looking at a homestead corridor. I spent a lot of time at the VTA trying to make sure that that continues to get prioritized and not forgotten about. But where the city is spending its money and its attention, for the most part, I think we're getting it right. And it's not that the city is ignoring other parts of the city to focus on downtown and the civic center. It's that the civic center is where most of our major properties are, our major facilities are, and downtown is where most of the people go to congregate, and that's where most of our tax base comes from.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
That's part of it. Yeah, for sure.
Excuse me, I muted myself there. Sue, you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah,
That'll be the last question.
how optimistic, Jonathan, are you that we'll get an all affordable housing development in one of the parking lots, especially considering the possible requirement of replacement parking?
I'm sorry, the question was, how are we going to do it?
How optimistic are you that it's going to happen?
I'm optimistic that we're going to get a significant amount of below market rate housing in one or both of those plazas. I am not optimistic that it's going to be 100% BMR. But until we see what the developers have submitted, and maybe I can kick this to Nick. I don't know what I think the envelopes have recently been opened, and I know that there was a lot of interest. There's no question that the council, the outgoing council, and I assume the new council as well, is going to advocate for as much BMR housing downtown as we can possibly get. It is probably going to be unrealistic to expect there to be 100% BMR housing, simply because of the cost of construction and the cost of making that happen. I mean, so you know more that better than I do. Until we know who are the partners that want to work with us and what it is they want to do, we're really kind of shooting in the dark. What the council has not done is sort of taken a lead role in saying, we want BMR, let's go out and find someone who's going to do it. We'll make sure that they follow the process, they submit an application, and we're going to be working with them every step of the way. That just wasn't a way for us to be able to move forward. But my understanding is there are a significant number of applications, probably more than 5. So if you have multiple developers who want to make something work, I think that we can be creative and find a way to make something work. My background is in real estate. I practice plenty of real estate law. I practice plenty of land use law. Where there is a will, there is often a way. So we've made the land available. Now it's a question of making the money available. The city wants to prioritize BMR housing. We want to get as much of it as we can. So how do we get the funding in place to make that happen? That's going to be the next step. I don't have an answer for you, Sue, on exactly how that's going to happen. I do believe that we are going to get, I don't believe that it's realistic to expect that it's going to be 100% BMR, but I do think that we're going to get a number that's going to make you proud.
Thank you. Nick, do you want to add anything to that since Jonathan referenced you? Well, I guess not.
No, sorry, I can't. I was just grabbing something from behind my desk. What I will say is that the affordable projects and any submittals that have been received have been a mixture of affordability levels, which that is a very key factor in any type of affordable development that's configured. Is the deepness of affordability. The threshold of the amount of units that have been essentially initially offered at varies, and it's very widespread. However, there is the component that I have been analyzing for just now over a year with the city's housing manager as well as an outside financial consultant is actually the feasibility of the development and the proposals that are actually getting essentially before the city. So we're taking in a lot of different considerations in order to actually make sure that what is being proposed will actually happen because we do want to actually see the creation of more housing ultimately on those sites.
Great, thank you. Well, just as Jonathan said, he'd like to begin and end council meetings as best he could on time. We like to do the same here, and we're coming up on 8:30 or 9:30 rather. So before you go, a few announcements. Our next meeting will be Friday, January 24th from 8:30 to 9:30 a.m. Please join us for a discussion entitled What's Ahead for 2025 with Los Altos Mayor Pete Daly. If you would like to be added to the LACC mailing list, please send an email to info@losaltoscommunitycoalition.org. This email is posted in chat for your convenience. A big thank you to the Los Altos Mountain View Community Foundation for providing LACC with financial in-kind support. Jonathan, thank you again for joining us today for a very thoughtful and great conversation. And also, thank you very much for your years of service to Los Altos, most recently as our mayor. We really appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us this morning. Look forward to seeing you on the 24th, if not sooner, downtown or elsewhere in town.